Did you know that Band of Brothers doesn't tell the whole story of the friendly fire incident involving Moose Heyliger that's depicted in the episode Crossroads? The incident took place on Halloween night, 1944, in Driel, Holland. In the series, Captain Dick Winters and First Lieutenant Frederick Heyliger, nicknamed Moose for his rather large size, are walking along a railroad track approaching a U.S. outpost that is under the command of First Lieutenant Harry Welsh, leader of 2nd Platoon. Moose Heyliger had assumed command of Easy Company several weeks prior after Colonel Sink made Dick Winters executive officer of 2nd Battalion. As they walk, Winters gives Moose some advice and encouragement with regard to his new role as company commander. Suddenly, an anxious sentry shouts, "Halt!" and seconds later, he opens fire on them and hits Moose Heyliger twice, with one bullet hitting his right shoulder and the other his left leg. Moose falls to the ground as Winters yells, "Hold your fire!" The young sentry, a private who is a new replacement, approaches and exclaims, "Oh my God," as he fully realizes that he just shot his commanding officer. At least, this is how the event is depicted in Band of Brothers. Yet, I recently discovered that not only are some of these details incorrect, there's a bit more to this story. In real life, Captain Dick Winters had asked Moose Heyliger to join him to perform a nighttime inspection of Easy Company's outposts, due to the fact that the Germans had been aggressively patrolling in E Company's sector. It's mentioned in Stephen Ambrose's book that Winters was bored as an executive officer, a promotion that Winters said was a tremendous letdown. Winters missed being in the field with Easy Company, and the nighttime inspection was a way for him to get out on a small operation again, while at the same time making sure the Germans hadn't penetrated the line. Winters and Moose were on their way to see First Lieutenant Harry Welsh at the command post, which was located in a barn about 50 yards west of the railroad tracks. Unlike the miniseries, the friendly fire shooting did not happen as they were walking along the tracks, but rather down a path that led to the command post. It's true that they were walking shoulder to shoulder, as the path was only about 6 to 7 feet wide. After reading Dick Winters' memoir, Beyond Band of Brothers, I discovered that the shooting was not solely due to a nervous sentry, but rather a perfect storm of mistakes, most of which are not mentioned in the series. In Band of Brothers, Moose Heyliger begins to respond to the sentry by identifying himself. "It's Moose," he starts to say as the sentry fires, cutting him off mid-sentence. However, what the series doesn't make clear is that in real life, when the sentry yelled "Halt!", Moose Heyliger hesitated, and he tried to state his name because he had forgotten the password, which prompted the anxious sentry to fire his M1 Garand rifle 3 times. In the sentry's defense, he was doing his job, given that Moose was stumbling over coming up with the correct password. It's also understandable that the sentry was on edge, because as Dick Winters noted in his memoir, the area had been extremely active with Germans for the past week. In Band of Brothers, Dick Winters, who's standing right next to Moose, heroically catches him after he's shot and gently lowers Moose to the ground. However, in real life, Winters dove into a drainage ditch on the side of the path to momentarily take cover and was lucky he wasn't hit too. The series indicates that the sentry, who was about 10 yards away, was a new replacement, a private from Wyoming. In Richard Winters' memoir, he does not mention the identity of the soldier, and though he does acknowledge that the sentry was only doing his job, he also states the following: "It was apparent that the sentry was very nervous as we approached the outpost. Normally, a soldier on the outpost would duck down and hope to recognize a silhouette before commencing fire. The trooper who shot Heyliger, whose name I don't care to remember, was obviously scared to death. He failed to take any precaution before he opened fire. Where I transferred him, I neither know nor care. He had to live with what he did for the rest of his life. At the time, however, I wasn't thinking about his future. I was thinking about the morale of Easy Company. Under no circumstances could the trooper remain with the company." Stephen Ambrose states in his book that the sentry was a veteran paratrooper, not a new recruit as implied in the series. Understandably, the incident crushed the man, who had to live with what had transpired. It was rumored that the identity of the sentry was changed for the series at the request of the veterans, understanding that the sentry would have had to carry the guilt of shooting his comrade with him for all those years and didn't need to relive it again by being named in the series. While Winters puts most of the blame on the sentry in his memoir, what's not directly mentioned in Band of Brothers is that Moose Heyliger had telephoned Lieutenant Harry Welsh at the command post and told him that he and Winters were on their way to see him. Welsh was supposed to notify his outposts that Winters and Moose would be arriving, but he failed to do so. According to Dick Winters, Welsh was an excellent platoon leader, but on this occasion, he failed to notify his outposts that we were approaching their position. Welsh's significant mistake seems to be only slightly alluded to in the series when Bill Garnier later comes into Winters' office and lets them know that Moose is doing better, at which point Winters gives Welsh a stern stare and Welsh can't look him in the eye. I've seen it stated that Welsh may have been drunk at the time, which could explain why he forgot to alert the outposts, but I've never read any reliable reports to corroborate this, and it seems to be purely speculation and therefore should be regarded as such. Immediately after Moose Heyliger is shot in the series, Dick Winters tells the sentry to send for Lieutenant Welsh. However, in real life, the sentry never approached Dick Winters, and instead Winters heard him running off to get help. After several minutes, Winters heard footsteps running toward them. He began to move to grab his rifle, but then recognized Harry Welsh calling in a low voice, "Moose, Winters." When Welsh arrives with 2 Easy Company men, he helps Winters administer first aid until medic Eugene Doc Rowe arrives. They apply tourniquets and inject morphine. In Band of Brothers, Welsh makes another mistake. He gives Moose the morphine and forgets to pin the morphine syringe to Moose's collar. This was typically done so that the medic and anyone else treating the wounded soldier later on would know how much morphine they've already had, so as not to cause a potentially fatal overdose. After loading Moose into a truck, Doc Rowe scolds Harry Welsh and Dick Winters, his superior officers, for making the error. While this moment with Doc Rowe appears to be fictional, Winters does mention in his memoir that he and Welsh gave Moose several shots of morphine to ease the pain, but there is no mention of them forgetting to pin the syringe to Moose's collar and then being scolded for it. However, I do like this scene because it teaches an important detail about the application of morphine to treat wounded soldiers during the war that not every movie gets right. In Band of Brothers, we learn that Moose Heyliger is expected to survive. Like in the series, the incident marked an end to Moose's World War II service, and he was in the hospital for the next 2.5 years until his discharge in 1947. As Winters noted in his memoir, during the friendly fire incident, Moose Heyliger's calf looked like it had just been blown away. Moose underwent several surgeries, including skin and nerve grafts. Winters said that Moose suffered terribly from that wound for the remainder of his life. And according to Winters, to the day Moose died over half a century later, he still could not recall the password. Moose lived until age 85, passing away on November 3, 2001, roughly 2 months after the release of the Band of Brothers miniseries, and 1 day prior to the airing of the final episode. According to Marcus Brotherton's book, A Company of Heroes, Moose traveled to Europe with his family earlier that year to attend the Band of Brothers premiere in Normandy. In the end, the real-life friendly fire incident involving Moose Heyliger was the result of a sequence of mistakes, including Harry Welsh not announcing the patrol, the sentry being too nervous, and Moose forgetting the password. There are some who have tried to speculate about the identity of the sentry by examining transfers out of the company at the time, specifically transfers not due to injury. While there are several possibilities, I think whoever that man was, if he did survive the war, he likely endured enough torment and guilt over the course of his life that the least we can do is let him rest in peace. I could find no mention of Harry Welsh ever commenting on the incident. He became a teacher in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and he rarely spoke of his time in the war. In Dick Winters' memoir, he seems to put most of the blame on the sentry, while to some degree deflecting blame from Harry Welsh and Moose Heyliger himself. I wonder if this is because Winters was good friends with Welsh, and as Stephen Ambrose noted in his book, Winters liked Heyliger immensely. Keeping the sentry's identity anonymous in his memoir and the series also makes it easier to deflect most of the blame to the sentry. It is also rather interesting that the series, which relied significantly on input from Winters, obscures the fact that Welsh and Heyliger were also at fault. We're not even directly told that Moose Heyliger forgot the password, nor is it made clear that Welsh failed to inform his outposts of their arrival. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now that we have a broader understanding of this incident, who do you think is most at fault? If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more Band of Brothers content, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Anchors away, my friends.